Who's that? The other lady that came in with Nabila is what? Okay. What's it? What did I talk about? Is it Hajia?
It's not that. Country director, now this is it now. The one that came with that man. Yeah, this one. I don't know this one. This first thing is perfect. I'm going saying
Who is Nabila Aguilera?
and
Nabila Aguilera. I want to carry my phone and take. Okay. Thank you. left and your right and say hello. Tell them how are you in your language. In your language. If in your language. I'm going to ask you what the person said. Nabila, please, what's how are you in your language?
Yeah, Kiki.
Yeah, Kike. That's easy. That's easy. I'm looking for. Please, what's how are you in your language?
Bauni.
All this easy. I'm looking for all this. Sir, can I come to you? It's the same thing. How are you in your language?
Urisei. Urisei.
Urise. Please, a round of applause for her, please. Please, let's look alive. A round of applause, please. Remember, like I said, I'm the driver. If you follow me calmly on this journey, we'll enjoy ourselves. If you don't follow me, I will just drive us to somewhere. With me today, also right next to the driver's seat, is a great man who's going to be running the interpretation for us, Mr. Franklin Efe. Please, a round of applause for him, please. He's doing the Lord's work. Also, assisting him would be Ronke Bright, who will also be interpreting for us today. A round of applause, please. They say that clapping helps you lose weight. So please, clapping helps you make money. Clapping will help you make money. I'd like to recognize the presence of the ambassador of the Royal Norwegian Embassy to Nigeria, Mr. Kent Eliv Kine. Please, a round of applause, please, for him, please. Also like to recognize the presence of a woman who my mom has haunted me with. Every day she's talking about this woman. I'm like, just go and live with this woman. This woman is not just a person who has a heart for people, but she's someone who's constantly in her work, built bridges, restored hope, and just let you know that it is possible in Nigeria. That we want is possible. I want to recognize the presence of Madam Mariam Uwais, who is the Special Advisor to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, on social investment. Madam, my mother can rest. Also, I'd like to recognize the presence of Nabila Gulele. I have been following you on social media. One day I will be like you. She is the technical advisor to the Honorable Minister for Finance. Please, a round of applause for her, please. As we go on during the day, I'm going to give you a bit of story and dossier on these people. So allow me to just do very tiny, introduction so that we can move along. Let me also introduce and recognize the presence of Mrs. Amina Dorai, who is the country director for Pathfinder. Please, a round of applause for her, please. Thank you. She's so pretty. As we move on, I will keep introducing people and I will keep saying what we need to say. But just as we will typically do, because we belong to a country, we are citizens and patriots of a country that we love and we will continuously serve. I'd like us to rise as we take the national anthem. Please, are we ready? Please rise. It is a thing of joy. It's a thing of gladness to remember why we serve. Media, please, can we play the national anthem? Thank you. A round of applause as we all sit down. It's like we don't want to make money. When I say round of applause, people are not. You don't know whether when we're leaving here, we'll be distributing cash. while they were playing the national anthem, always when they played, I have goose pimples running through me. Because right there is a call to serve, saying to serve with all our might. Someone like Hilda Bachi, who displayed that serving with all her might. It might look like what she did for the past 4 days was maybe serving for her, but she brought thousands, hundreds of thousands of Nigerians together to remind us that this is a call to serve ourselves with all our might until we no longer have anything separating us. Now, for the welcome address, I talked a little bit about this man, but let me dive deeper. I remember reading about this man and I wondered, is it possible to have two fathers? This is a man who single-handedly worked with a team of experts to create one of the world's largest think tanks. And when I say one of the world's largest think tanks, I'm talking about a think tank that has, all my village people. I'm talking about a think tank that has content, right? A think tank that actually has a job and they're sticking to that job. They have a calling, a purpose. I'm talking about none other than the NESG. They built a think tank that Nigeria can boldly say, that's one of ours. I want to welcome someone, like I said, we call Daddy because he's constantly steering us through the right direction, teaching, guiding, shining a light to make sure that we all deliver what we're supposed to deliver. Please put your hands together. And when I say put your hands together, please clap as I make welcome Mr. Loyi Jayola, who is the Chief Executive Officer of NESG, for the welcome address.
Thank you very much. Don't worry, I'm not about to lose my job. I didn't create NESG. The story of NESG will not be complete if you don't remember the likes of Chief Enesheneko, Alhaji Ahmed Jordan, Pascal Dozier, and all of those people. Those are great Nigerians. It was 30 years ago. But what it did was to raise a generation of people that will take it and then drive it along. He started as a rapporteur, but he's not grown up to be board member and now to be his, and then we're thinking about generation that would take it. So thank you, but don't let me lose my job. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me recognize my sister. You know, we date back to a long time, running to almost 40 years now. We used to struggle in Central Bank. We were both in Central Bank. And then I recognize her because, and the reason I'm sitting now and recognizing her is that this PIC we're talking about, this Policy Intelligence Innovation Center, the history of PIC will not be told in Nigeria if we don't talk about Meramo Waste. It's not complete. Because when the idea to start it up started, it was about, okay, let's do it government. And they went to her. And she said, if you want sustainability, if you want something that will move from government to government, you then need an institution that has proven it. And she said, go and meet NESG. It's very, very rare. Many of people think about what we can do for ourselves now and thereafter, whether it is sustained or not. It's not. So, the days of celebrating PIC will come, and then we will not forget that. But for that commitment to say, take it to NESG, you probably won't have a PIC. And we have resolved, since they've done it 30 years ago, we have kept it. Anything we give, we'll pass it on to generation and generation. And thank all of you. I recognize in particular distinguished panelists and the ambassador of Norway that is ably represented, and all of you, ladies and gentlemen. So they asked me to welcome. I normally would say welcome and go. But they gave me a speech, and I don't want them to drive me away. So it's indeed a great pleasure to welcome you to the unveiling of the Purple Book, themed From Voices to Action. The Purple Book is a curation of policy and programs, recommendations From the PIC maiden edition of the Gender and Inclusion Summit, GS22, held in November 2022. The inaugural event convened stakeholders drawn from the public, private, and development sectors to deliver gender-responsive programs in their respective spaces, thus fostering a gender and inclusive society where no one is left behind. Our commitment at that Gender GS22 Summit, which held exactly 6 months ago, was to deliver a purple book. You know, they always do, you know, at the summit, when the summit started 30 years ago, they always deliver what we call a green book, right? The green book, you know, it goes to the federal government. It must go to FEC. And so when Osaji said, there must be a purple book, I said, okay, at least it shows that we are serious about gender and inclusion. And so just as Green Book started, when the summit started, Purple Book is starting when the Gender Summit started. So thank you, Osasia, and your team for bringing this to bear. And so we have carefully ensured that some of the recommendations in this document are backed by evidence and best practices for delivering gender-responsive policies and programs, as well as inclusion. We therefore gladly welcome you to this event, which marks the beginning of many, as we are not only here to reflect on the launch of the Purple Book, we're also here to unveil the theme for the Gender Inclusion Summit 2023. The Gender and Inclusion Summit is now an institutionalized event to ensure that annually stakeholders can gather, not just within Nigeria, but all over Africa to discuss and deliberate on the important steps towards closing the gap. We have no doubt that both the PIC and NESG, with a track record of achievements, have ensured that every idea and recommendation from the Gender and Inclusion Summit has been captured in a public book, Purple Book, and will further foster towards achieving a gender and inclusive society for all Nigerians. There is still much to be done. Much responsibility lies upon us to create the inclusive society we all seek. Endangering gender equality will require continuous collaboration between government, private, and public society, civil society, organizations, and communities, recognizing and addressing the intersectoral forms of discriminations and working together to creating a society where all individuals can enjoy equal rights, opportunities, and freedoms. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join this discussion. As we know, there's much to be done and much more responsibility lies ahead upon us to create that inclusive society we all seek. At the NESG, when it was set up in 30 years ago, the founding fathers gave us 6 clear principles upon which they want Nigeria to be built. And 5 years ago, we tweaked that and said, we've seen a nation that had grown with GDP of over 10%. I didn't carry everybody along. And therefore, Nigeria will not be complete if we don't have a society that is inclusive. And therefore, we added a 7th pillar to it. It's about inclusion. And all we talk everywhere is what? Inclusion. If you want to share prosperity, you must include everyone. So we believe that the programs that we're going to do will give us the opportunity to initiate conversations that will set the stage for future engagements. And I hope we all will be ready to join the team. You know, the beautiful thing along about the work we do is that we do it relying on volunteers. At the NESG, we have over 800 people that volunteer. The 2 things I was taught when I joined 30 years ago. We pay to serve, and we don't care who takes the glory. People come in, when we invite you to come, we don't give you ticket, we don't give you accommodation, you will come, because all we do is in the national interest. Our board members, I'm the only board member that is paid because I run it on a daily basis. But every board member, no sitting allowance, no payment. We call you to Abuja 20 times, you buy your ticket, you do your accommodation, you must show up, because all we do is in the national interest. On that note, I want to welcome all of us to this morning activity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for that wonderful. I'd like to recognize the presence of I'd like to recognize the presence of Dr. Ejike Oji. He's the Chairman, Technical Management Committee, Association for the Advancement of Family Planning, AAFP. Please, a round of applause for him, please. Also, I'd like to recognize the presence of Dr. Osasuyi Drisu, who is the Executive Director of the PIC. A round of applause for her, please. Also, to recognize the presence of Mr. Michael Ojo, who is the Country Director of GAIN. Please, a round of applause, please. Thank you so much, sir. Also, to recognize the presence of Takudzwa Kanyangara, who is the Gender and Development Manager for UNICEF. Please, a round of applause, please. Thank you. Okay, we're moving now to the next, which is going to be the goodwill messages. While we're waiting to make sure we get the people that will do that, I'd like us to... Okay. I'd like us to move on to the opening speech. Are we ready for goodwill messages? Okay. So we're going to move on to the opening speech. I introduced this lady, and I'm going to introduce her again. I'm bringing up for the opening speech Mrs. Mariam Uwais, the Special Advisor to the President on Social Investments, for her to give the opening speech. Please, a round of applause for her, please.
Good morning, NESG, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Norway. I actually should be thanking the NESG, not the other way. It's not the other way around. When we were struggling with the social investment programs, we worked with the NESG. They supported us, they provided the evidence, they became our cheerleaders when people doubted what we were doing. And the Policy Innovation Center was really remarkable in the sense that they went around, working with Accenture and Busara, providing, messaging, effecting behavioral change. It was very exciting for me to see that they were institutionalizing the PIC, because it is something that is really required in our country. Evidence-based information is really, really critical for us to be able to move forward, and so thank you, NESG. Thank you for all the support, and they did all the work, not us at the Social Investment Office. So I'd like to warmly welcome you to the launch of the Purple Book, themed From Voices to Action. This is indeed a landmark event. As a speaker at the inaugural Gender and Inclusion Summit in 2022, I wish to highlight the critical conversations we explored during the summit from a multi-sectoral viewpoint. Gender equality or equity is undoubtedly at the heart of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is a fundamental human right and a vital basis for peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable society. Regrettably, however, with under 10 years left to meet the initial target set to achieve the SDG goals, the world is still grappling with the challenge of meeting our targets. Nigeria ranks 123rd out of 143 countries on the global gender gap, with which dismal statistics call for a concerted effort for swift and effective action. Amid the effect of COVID-19, the climate emergency, and rising economic and political insecurity, progress on gender equality has not only been hard hit, it is projected that it will take at least 132 years to close the gender parity. The opportunity provided to have national high-level multi-sectoral conversations on gender by the PIC through the Gender and Inclusion Summit is unique and commendable. More often than not, conversations like this, despite being very critical for nation building, fall through the cracks because key actors are unable to document specific action points and recommendations that are actionable. The summit was a convergence point for various actors to tell their stories, brainstorm on the way forward, share and learn in a manner that important synergies were formed and ideas harnessed. I'm delighted that the PIC has fulfilled the promise of curating the recommendations from the summit, thereby making the conversation and content publicly accessible for stakeholders. The Purple Book represents an important milestone as it conveys insightful thoughts, strategies, and ideas that should be reference material for anyone who is interested in moving from talk to action. Having reviewed the content and participated fully at the summit, I can assure you that you will find the perspectives very interesting, diverse, and all-encompassing on a wide range of gender subjects. The intersecting nature of gender across major sectors of endeavor, including health, education, social development, finance, agriculture, etc., and how they come together in impacting on the female needs an integrated and holistic perspective to gender transformation. You will therefore find the discussions broad and yet very specific in highlighting some of the major issues and recommendations for policy and programming. I am excited the summit is not just a one-off event. As the PIC unveils the theme for this year's summit, this lends credence to value that the gathering of bright minds is intent on adding, and it is also indicative of greater things to look forward to in GS 2023. I am delighted to be part of the launch and unveiling event and will hopefully encourage you to utilize the recommendations in the Purple Book in a most effective manner. Even so, we get to hear of your own success stories at GS 2023. I thank you most sincerely for your participation at this event, while I say a huge thank you and congratulate the PIC team on this very auspicious occasion.
Thank you so much, Ma, for that wonderful opening speech. The media team, please prepare for the video documentary. But while we're preparing, I'd like to recognize the presence of Dr. Lillian Anomnachi, Executive Director, TA Connect. Please, a round of applause for her, please. Thank you so much. While we're waiting, preparing for the video documentary, I'd like to invite His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Royal Norwegian Embassy, to please come forward and give a goodwill. Oh, as ably represented. Please, can you come forward and give a goodwill speech, please? Thank you. A round of applause for him, please.
Thank you, Madam. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all people who have been part of the production of this Purple Book, a big congratulations to you all. This is a topic that is close to any Norwegian's heart. And I just want to give you one example of how we are seeing examples of gender inclusion in Norway. I'm working to strengthen business relationships between Norway and Nigeria. That's why I'm so so happy for the collaboration with NESG. Some years ago, in Norway, it was decided by law that Norwegian companies that were on the stock exchange, they had to have a better gender balance. And of course, this created a lot of discussions and resistance in the beginning. But the government, they wanted this to happen, and it happened. And now we can see the benefits from that. So research shows that the companies that have been following this this gender inclusion on the board of stock exchange companies are performing better, as in any other area of the Norwegian society. So I just want to again say that I'm looking very forward to reading the Purple Book, commend the organizers of this launch and everyone who has contributed to it. You're doing tremendous work, and we're so happy to be able to be part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. Are we ready for the video documentary? Thank you. Please, can we turn off the lights? And let's keep our eyes peeled on the screen.
Happening live here at the Congress Hall, the Hilton, Abuja.
It's indeed my pleasure to formally welcome you all to the Policy Innovation Center Gender and Inclusion Summit 2022. The first of its kind, with the theme, Connecting the Dots for a Gender Inclusive Society.
There's a great deal of stereotypes and harmful practices, which are very often disguised as culture that holds women and girls back.
Gender rights are basic human rights and everyone's entitled to them.
We have a lot of system deficit, so we need a overhaul of all of our systems.
Because nations that have gender parity have greater economic and developmental growth, less conflict, and higher rates of literacy than those that do not.
And that is why, at least more importantly in the last decade, diversity, equity, and inclusion has become front and center.
When we talk about women empowerment, the first thing we begin to think of is to buy sewing machine and to buy grinding machine. Because imagine, we have already imagined that for women empowerment, they should be grinding, they should be sewing clothes, they should be baking.
Right down at the grassroots, there is that issue, there's that big gap. A lot of women are not included. So many of them do not have bank accounts.
It's not about having more women and having less men, it's about having balance. That's what will make the difference.
Let's get into that headspace of who we imagine a man or a woman to be.
We need data to inform our strategies and our intervention.
There was a call for abstracts, and we had close to 50 submissions, out of which we have selected these 9 to make presentations this afternoon.
1 in 3 women lawyers harassed, sexually harassed. Who do you go to if the legal profession is not even safe for lawyers?
Gender-based violence is not just about sexual violence. It's also about physical, emotional. When you deny resources, you're committing gender-based violence.
We need to have a concerted effort, creating people who understand what the issues are.
So as we move forward, we need to be deliberate. I mean, what brought about exclusion in the first place?
So equality and equity need to coexist.
Women empowerment is key.
The gap is, what are the things that women need to realize their full economic potential? A big part of that is just access to finance.
70% of the women in smallholder farmers are the ones even producing more than the men.
There's a digital divide. That is, women have less access to all these digital devices.
Recognize that part of the reason we have so few women at the top in banking was that the workplace was not designed to accommodate the responsibilities of women as it cuts across.
Also,
We sincerely apologize for that break in transmission. When we get back that sound, we will completely play the video. But I'd like to recognize the presence of Mrs. Ifoma Anyanwu, who is ably representing the Permanent Secretary, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. She is the Deputy Director and also the Head of Gender in the Ministry. A round of applause for her, please. I'd also like to recognize the presence of Dr. Celestine Eke, who is a member of the Board of Trustees for WIMBIS. Please, a round of applause for her, please. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to continue with our program until we can fix the video. Next is an introduction to the Purple Book, why we are here. And that will be handled by none other than the Executive Director of the PIC, Dr. Osasui Dirisi. Please, a round of applause for her.
Good morning, everyone. I stand on established protocols. I want to give us So I'm here to give us an overview of the Purple Book. But in order to do that, I'll just take you on a brief journey through how we got to the point where we decided to do a Gender and Inclusion Summit. Next slide. Presents a disconnect in the way we live, in the way we walk, and in the way we engage as a country. Next slide. So for us, we looked at a few things. One, gender equality is a key accelerator to the SDGs. Every day we have people, drum those statistics of the fact that we, at the current rate at which we are going, we would need 132 years to achieve equality. And that's really scary, but those are the facts. And knowing that we have a 2030 SDG goal, how do we get to 2030 and expect to achieve the SDGs when the key missing link is gender equality? So we thought to just provide a platform. So last year was about providing a platform to reflect and think about strategies. First of all, identify the gaps, and then reflect on strategies to begin to, connect those dots and think about how we can begin to improve governance, make governance more responsive, and make policy and programming more responsive in Nigeria. And so we convened a wide range of stakeholders. So last year we had donors, we had partners, we had the diplomatic community, we had people from academia, and we just brought everyone to begin to reflect on what the issues were and how we can address them. Next slide. And so one of the things that we expected to achieve, at the end of last year's summit was a Purple Book. And before it looks like a mystical thing, purple was just mixing blue and pink and blue. That was how we just arrived at purple, because we're trying to be inclusive of both genders. And we thought that it was good. A lot of times we have good conversations at events, and then after the event, we all go home wondering, when next we'll have an opportunity to gather again. So we felt that if there was a book, a reference guide that people can look at 5, 10, 20 years later, reflect. For example, one of the most interesting sessions to me last year was gender and the media. So I know that I can go back, reflect on the challenges, for example, that women and possibly men in media face, and then begin to think about what sort of strategies can be put in place to ensure that there's improvements in the media and outcomes for men and women. So one of the expected outcomes was have this book that talks about innovative approaches to advancing inclusion, policy recommendations, and lessons for future policy actions. And really that's what the Purple Book, which we will unveil shortly, is all about. And you will see reflected, in the book, some of the tracks that, and some of the learnings that came from the different summit tracks. Next slide. So here we are, launching the Purple Book today. I enjoin us to take our time, review evidence from the book, look at conversations that happened, and hopefully we have you join us this year to also lend your voice, because it's not a conversation that is next slide. And I'll just briefly tell you about the Policy Innovation Center. So the Policy Innovation Center, next slide, was set up in October 2021 with the vision to deliver better policies and innovative solutions for social impacts. We seek to improve policies and programs using two key strategies: gender transformative and behavioral strategies to drive social change. Next slide. And our capability areas, we do work around evidence-based policy, capacity development, social and behavioral research, gender equality and social inclusion, behavioral insights application, and social and behavioral change. Next slide. And these are the sectors that we work in. Next slide. And so we have a gender and social inclusion portfolio under which the policy, the Gender Summit is situated. So under this pillar, we do work around policy and governance, gender system strengthening, and gender portfolio management. So for our work on policy and governance, next slide, it's where we have the Gender and Inclusion Summit. And what we do is promote advocacy for gender equality for women, persons living with disability, youth, and other marginalized groups. Next slide. And then we have a gender system strengthening program where we strengthen gender systems. We all talk about gender disaggregated data every day, but we don't want to just keep paying lip service to that. How do you go about that? When sometimes people tell you they collect gender disaggregated data and it's just at the beginning of the presentation, you see gender, male, female, others, and that's all. So what sort of data do we need to collect? What sort of capacity building is needed to equip professionals and practitioners to engage on gender issues and implement programs? And then we also have an agency-based empowerment training to enhance the capacity of women to access sustainable livelihood opportunities. Next slide. And so we have a 5-day gender and development course. We just completed that last week. It runs April and September every year and is in collaboration with the Center of Gender and Social Policy Studies at the University of Ife. Next slide. And then finally, we have, using our behavioral insights work, we support gender transformative programs to address gender and inequalities to create a sustainable environment for sustainable change. So I welcome you as we unveil the Purple Book today to enjoy reading about the conversations we had last year and looking forward to seeing you in November. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sesi Jurisu, Executive Director of PIC. Would love to play the video again, but before we do that, I'd like to take a goodwill message from the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Agriculture, ably represented by Mrs. Ifoma Anyanwu. Please, a round of applause as she comes. 5 minutes, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mrs. Ifoma Anyanwu, Deputy Director that is in charge of mainstreaming gender in the agricultural sector. I bring to all of us the goodwill message and warm regards from the Permanent Secretary, Federal Minister of Agriculture, Dr. Enes Umahihe. He has directed me based on exigencies of his office to read his address. I'm pleased to be invited to the launch of the Purple Book and give a goodwill message on connecting the dots to ensure an inclusive society. Gender roles, which is what society assigns for both men and women, has created unequal gender power relations across sectors, especially in three perspectives: rights, access, and voice. Nigeria, as a member nation, UN nation, signs various protocol that is predicated on addressing the challenges women face, particularly the issue of elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, the Sustainable Development Goal, particularly goal number 5, that is predicated on empowerment of all women, empowerment of all girls, leaving no one behind, and of course, addressing gender equality. The above perspectives can be achieved through the instrumentality of gender mainstreaming across sectors. Permit me to state that the strategy for achieving the symbol called gender inclusive society is simply what we call mind mapping in gender circle. And when we saw the issue of connecting the dots, we were simply happy. And then this connecting the dots will equally mean a strategic partnership, multifaceted and multi-sensitive approaches across sectors. It is not only one sector. So what are the strategies that are used to achieve a gender-sensitive society? It ranges from the conscientization of the mental attitude of both men and women on gender issues so that they can be able to integrate gender perspective. It's all about affirmative action, financial inclusion, legislation, appointive position, and all this. Finally, I just want to say that the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development has been able to engender the agricultural sector by producing and launching the National Gender Policy on Agriculture that has been able to engender the agricultural sector, making sure that women have access to available agricultural access. Apart from women, we equally deal with people with disabilities. Gender issues are key, particularly as women make up to half of the society. So if you discriminate against half of your population, you are just operating on half current, and therefore one will not go so far. Therefore, integration of gender perspective as far as connecting the dots and having an inclusive society is key to national development. Thank you so very much for listening. Sorry, please, just 1 minute. Sorry, this is the document produced by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture that are driving, or that is driving, the empowerment of women and those with disabilities. This document has become a template for various countries. We have presented this across, it has 11 objectives. And incidentally, I brought 20 copies of this to be shared among participants. I thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Oh, I already have one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take one, eh?
Thank you so much. A round of applause for her, please. All right, so we're going to go ahead and turn off the lights and take that video one more time. And after that, we'll prepare for the review of the Purple Book.
Happening live here at the Congress Hall, the Hilton, Abuja.
It's indeed my pleasure to formally welcome you all to the Policy Innovation Center Gender and Inclusion Summit 2022, the first of its kind, with the theme Connecting the Dots for a gender-inclusive society.
There's a great deal of stereotypes and harmful practices which are very often disguised as culture that holds women and girls back.
Gender rights are basic human rights and everyone's entitled to them.
We have a lot of system deficit, so we need a overhaul of all of our systems.
Because nations that have gender parity have greater economic and developmental growth, less conflict, and higher rates of literacy than those that do not.
And that is why, at least more importantly in the last decade, diversity, equity, and inclusion has become front and center.
When we talk about women empowerment, the first thing we begin to think of is to buy sewing machine and to buy grinding machine. Because we have already imagined that for women empowerment, they should be grinding, they should be sewing clothes, they should be baking.
Right down at the grassroots, there is that issue, there's that big gap. A lot of women are not included. So many of them do not have bank accounts.
It's not about having more women and having less men, it's about having balance. That's what will make the difference.
Let's get into that headspace of who we imagine a man or a woman to be.
We need data to inform our strategies and our intervention.
There was a call for abstracts, and we had close to 50 submissions, out of which we have selected these 9 to make presentations this afternoon.
1 in 3 women in law is harassed, sexually harassed. Who do you go to if the legal profession is not even safe for lawyers?
Gender-based violence is not just about sexual violence. It's also about physical, emotional. When you deny resources, you're committing gender-based violence.
We need to have a concerted effort of creating people who understand what the issues are.
So as we move forward, we need to be deliberate. I mean, what brought about exclusion in the first place? So equality and equity need to coexist.
Women empowerment is key.
The gap is, what are the things that women need to realize their full economic potential? A big part of that is just access to finance.
70% of the women in smallholder farmers are the ones even producing more than the men.
There's a digital divide. That is, women have less access to all these digital devices.
Recognize that.
Hello? Hello? Same sound. Okay, so we're going to move on. It's like this video doesn't want us. Okay, it's back.
Part of the reason we have so few women at the top in banking was that the workplace was not designed to accommodate the responsibilities of women as it cuts across.
Also, considering contextual realities of women across the different geopolitical zones is very important while designing financial services and products.
It makes economics policy sense to make sure that the whole of the population, women, youth, men, young boys, everybody is, as well as people with special needs, everybody has a quota to contribute if that growth is to be inclusive.
Today is about bringing everyone together. It's not just about women, but for us to think more broadly about equality and equity in inclusive, transformative ways.
And so thank you for being so much a part of making this happen. Look out for the report of the summit. We call the report the Purple Book. See you next year when we will have consolidated and made actions happen on the recommendations that have come out of today.
Thank you so much for that wonderful video. Please, let's not start dancing yet. We're going to move into the review of the Purple Book, Connecting the Dots for a Gender-Inclusive Society. Media, please, can you kindly reduce your voice, please? We're going to be welcoming 3 important people that will be doing this review. We're going to be bringing up Dr. Michael Kunuji. I think that Dr. Michael joined us virtually, right? Dr. Michael, we're good to go? Yes, okay. Also, Dr. Michael Kunuji is the Associate Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Lagos. Also, we would have Takudzwa Kanyangarara, the Gender and Development Manager, UNICEF Nigeria, for a review. And also we would have Ekaite Judith Umor, Country Director, CBM Global Disability Inclusion, for their review. Please, a round of applause for them. Please, can you just kindly come up? Please, can Dr. Michael hear me?
Yes.
Okay, he can hear me. Is it possible for us to project Dr. Michael right here on the screen, please? Thank you, ma'am. Okay, while we get Dr. Michael on the screen, I think that I am going to hand over the microphone to Madam.
Okay, then. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I thought my sister, Dr. Sasuyi, was going to say something, then I will say, but now they asked me to review the whole book. It's so nice to see Aja Miriam. Thank you so much, Ma, for the long mentorship and everyone here. So when my sister, Dr. Sasuyi, called me and she said to me, oh, please, we would like you to come and be our guest and want to launch the Purple Book. And I said, oh, the Purple Book? That resonated with me because some years ago, we did an activity and launched a project called the Purple Corner. So I said, oh, so what about the Purple Book? And so we started, talking and all of that. And I told her the Purple Corner was a safe space where women and girls with disability could hang out and talk about the sexual and gender-based violence in a respectful manner where people can listen to them, a safe space where they can tell everybody everything, and that most of the corners we have around, we're not like disability very sensitive, and people, or women and girls with disability, we're not very comfortable to tell their stories around. So yeah, I am. What about the Purple Book? I've gone through the Purple Book. Oh, and he sent me a soft copy. And I just, looked at it. And I think, first of all, let me start by saying that I think it's a very beautiful book. Very, very beautiful book. I also want to say that there was a lot of hard work. Lots of hard work went into this, and that people, gave it all the time that it needed. I went through the recommendations, and I like the way it is laid out about the issues and challenges and the policy and programmatic recommendation. One thing I like about it is going beyond the talk. So we come to a program, we talk, all of these talks have been happening for like 20, 30 years ago. We keep talking and talking, and we recycle workshops. But I think this has a strategic direction. That's what I think for me. I like the fact that it's well laid out in a way that you can run with projects. You have more than 50 projects embedded in these recommendations. While going through the Purple Book, I was looking at it from the disability lens. And I was saying, okay, so policy recommendation, all right, can I see myself here? And what is happening here? And I'll look at the programmatic recommendation and say, okay, what is happening here? So I think this is a very good book put together, but we have to be very intentional. If we have to unpack how we have to deliver on all the policies and projects, I think it's going to be very voluminous. Just to say that we are here to help unpack and support how to deliver on this. It's very, very clear. Except you are not a strategist or you can't see beyond, it's so loaded. So in the implementation, that is where we see ourselves now. How do we unpack it in such a way that in the course of implementation, again, no one is left behind? That is it for me. When I attended the summit last year, I said we must be intentional, and I meant it. Because the intersectionality approach that will be used in implementing all of these policy recommendations is what will give you the real big teeth to bite. I had look at it, and I want us to also, in the course of implementation, look at the process and the content. The process is as important as the content. There was one aspect I looked around and the normative issues, and it was talking about lack of access to justice. I said, okay, lack of access to justice is a gap, and we are going to be bridging this gap. What does that mean for a woman with a disability who has been violated, who want to seek justice? How are we unpacking it in such a way that she can really access justice? And I'm narrowing it down to a woman with developmental disability, intellectual and developmental disability, who has been raped and gone to court. How is the justice system ready to provide that kind of support to allow her, access justice, knowing fully well that using a normal court system, she might not be able to testify in a way that is convincing? How do we further unpack? So those are the kinds of things I was just looking around the recommendations. And I want to say that I love this book. It's a very interesting book that we must all buy into. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. I have a presentation, so hopefully someone can pull it up. But good morning, everyone. My name is Takudzwa Kanyangarara, and I am the Gender and Development Manager at UNICEF. And it's a pleasure to join the launch of this purple book. To our partner, NESG, thank you for having us here today. Like many organizations and agencies in this room today, gender equality and the empowerment of children, adolescents, and women is very much at the core of our mandate. And as part of our gender policy, we're committed to addressing gender-based violence and also breaking the cycle of intergenerational legacies of violence. And so I'm delighted to be here today to be reviewing the session on gender-based violence that took place last year at the summit. And the main purpose of this session was to look at the interplay between faith, culture, and the legal ecosystem in Nigeria. And so you can go to the third slide, and yes. And so I think, as many of you have already said, we know that gender-based violence and gender inequalities are predominant within Nigeria. And I think I'm preaching to the choir. Many of you know a lot of these data points. We know that 1 in 4 females and 1 in 10 males experience sexual violence in childhood. And so I'm not going to dwell on the slide because I think it's pretty clear that there are many issues within the context. But what I really liked about the summit was that it took the time to unpack what are the drivers of these figures. So if you move to the next slide, because if you don't understand what's driving these numbers, we won't be able to act, right? We won't be able to design actions that address the solutions. So what are some of the drivers? We know that within some communities, there's a low value placed on women and girls where they're seen as lower than boys and men. And this also links to them having limited autonomy about their lives. We know that in some cases, religious teachings are also used to justify and uphold violent norms. We also know that there's a culture of protecting family honor, which means that some GBV survivors are not able to speak out about the issues that are affecting them. We also know there's a culture of silence. I think the title of the session was Breaking the Silence. And so not just silence from survivors, but as well as witnesses where they're not coming forward to speak out about the issues. Other issues include poor implementation of policies, weak data systems, and weak formal justice systems. So the stakes are high, and we know that in order to make change, we're going to need coordinated and collective action. So what are some of the key policy recommendations that are in this beautiful purple book? So the first recommendation that was put forward is the importance of locally generated data to drive policies, right? We're saying that there's limited data. We know victims are not coming forward to speak up. And so we really need to invest in strengthening data systems. And part of this is establishing partnerships with key stakeholders and working with communities, using surveys, focus group discussions, and the like. One innovation that's highlighted in the Purple Book is the Ministry of Women Affairs National GBV dashboard, which has a bottom-up approach to collecting data. So the Purple Book is also providing solutions that are already there and that can be strengthened. The next recommendation was to strengthen structures that integrate GBV policies. And so, you know, we know there are a lot of policies in Nigeria and good ones too, but sometimes the challenge is the implementation and the domestication. So we need to really make sure that we are working towards improving the legal system and, you know, doing various types of activities. The third point is around driving community level advocacy and action. We know within communities, there are many power holders like traditional and religious leaders, and we need to work with them to address gender-based violence, as well as to support GBV survivors. The fourth one was around innovative solutions. I think we already heard the presentation about PIC and some of the approaches that they use, such as human-centered design. So using transformative approaches to the way we design our programs, as well as leveraging technology as well to support survivors of gender-based violence. And then lastly is involving the private sector. We heard a great example earlier from Norway, where the private sector was engaged to integrate gender issues, and the private sector has a critical role, and we need to really tap into that and work with them to address the issues. So I want to end on this last slide with highlighting a few change makers and 3 additional points that I think are pretty critical. So first we have Khadija, who is a lawyer who is working with families to navigate the complex legal system. And so the key recommendation here is that we need to meaningfully engage women and women-led organizations in this work, and working with women like Khadija, and not just engaging them, but also investing and funding the work that they do, right? Next up, we have a young youth advocate, and I will do my best to say this name since I'm not Nigerian, but Oluruntande, hopefully I can get a clap for that. Who is a young person who's championing gender-based violence after witnessing his aunt physically abused by her husband. And he's working in schools with students, girls and boys on gender-based violence issues. The message here, let's engage young people. Let's also engage men and boys. We need them to be agents of social transformation and to address harmful masculinities. And then the last one is Assistant Commandant Christy Umejiaku, who works in Sokoto. And she is a gender specialist who is working with families. We need more women like her. And we need to support more women in leadership and participation in criminal justice systems and beyond. But I think as we heard earlier in the video, it's also ensuring that the workplace is conducive for women, right? And so setting them up to be successful in their work environments. And so with that, I'm just going to close. It was good to hear the explanation behind the Purple Book, because I had been meaning to follow up with my PIC colleagues. But last night when I was looking up the word purple, I found words like wealth, nobility, power, and transformation. Transformation is possible. And I think the Purple Book shows that we have an arsenal of programming experiences and tools to end gender-based violence. But we need strong leadership and strategic investments. So let us act on the recommendations in the book. And I'm counting on PIC to bring us back together, maybe not this year, but next year, so we can take stock of where we are on the recommendations. So please pick up this book. It's a practical tool. It's not one of those books that's going to just sit on your shelf. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Hopefully, when we get together in November, we will invite you again. I'd like to, it's Dr. Michael. Okay, he's here. Please, Dr. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you once again for the opportunity to review this section of the Purple Book. And specifically, I will be reviewing the section on breaking gender stereotypes through the media and audience at a time. That section of the Purple Book highlights the summit session objectives of exploring the drivers of gender inequality in Nigeria's media ecosystem, strengthening efforts to close the gender gap across the media value chain, and providing policy and program recommendations for promoting gender equity and inclusion across the media value chain. So this section begins on the premise that the media influences gender norms and expectations and typically perpetuates gender inequality and stereotypes on which other forms of exclusion rests rather than challenge such ideas. And in making reference to the media, the authors here actually refer to the media in its different forms, so that is the traditional media as well as the modern and, if you like, online media. It talks about a number of normative issues. For instance, it's raised issues that include social norms that often reinforce cyberbullying of women and minority groups. The book notes that members of the public are unfairly critical of female journalists. In addition, the media drives negative gender and disability stereotypes, and by so doing, the media widens the gender gap further. An example of how this plays out is the objectification of women in adverts. Now I quote, a part of the section says, many adverts objectify women as playthings who are unable to enrich meaningful discussions as seen when they are displayed as add-ons to items on display for sale, end of quote. Power relations within media institutions also replicates, reinforce, and perpetuates patriarchy. The non-normative challenges include the absence of gender transformative and sexual exploitation and abuse policies, absence of psychosocial support services for victims of gender-based violence within the media space, and scarcity or dearth of opportunities for women to occupy leadership positions in media institutions. The book, based on these arguments, recommended strengthening the implementation of gender equitable and inclusive policies by government and then by media institutions. It also recommends the provision of a policy on how journalists, especially female journalists, can protect themselves from abuse. The section posits that programs may be designed to sensitize owners and leaders on the value of inclusion, owners of media institutions now, and then leaders within that space on the value of inclusion. Programs, for instance, can work on strengthening collaborations that bridge the gender gap and promote inclusion more broadly through the creation of safe spaces for journalists, particularly now female journalists, to seek redress when they become, or if and when they become victims of gender-based violence or cyberbullying or any other form of harassment. The media can also be transformed to advocacy tools for gender equality. For instance, the media can improve the portrayal of women and minority groups. The media can advocate for greater leadership roles for women and also lead the process by example, that is, by giving women greater opportunity to lead. So the section and the entire book, like other reviewers have said, is beautifully presented, and it is, for me, a must-read for all leaders and progress-oriented actors who seek to do things right. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. We can do better, please. A round of applause, please. A round of applause. Thank you so much. While we prepare for our music rendition, I'd like to invite our guests to please get back to their seats, and we clap for them, please, as they do that. Mr. Jordan Peters, please, where are you? All right. We'll take you briefly for 4 minutes while we have some jazz. We have you serenade us with some jazz. Thank you. Yes, you can clap. It doesn't hurt, please. Mr. Jordan, 2 minutes, don't go. Mr. Jordan Peters, everyone. Please a round of applause for Mr. Jordan Peters. Please. Thank you. I know that when God was doing this distribution of voice, so whenever I want to greet people happy birthday, they expect me to sing. I disappoint every time. So, Mr. Jordan, me and you, we need to plan. So let's see how, I want to make money from everything. So I have to learn how to do that. Thank you. That was a wonderful segue into the next section. Would like to bring up the next people who are going to be taking us down the journey of our panel session. Quickly, let's have on the panel seats Dr. Lillian Anomnachi, Executive Director, TAC Connect. Please, a round of applause as she makes her way to the seat. Please, ma'am. Thank you so much. Followed also by Mrs. Nabila Aguele, Special Advisor to the Honorable Minister, Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Plan in Nigeria. Round of applause, please. Finally, let's have with us Dr. Ejike Oji, Chairman, Technical Management Committee, Association for the Advancement of Family Planning. Round of applause as he sits. Now, I'll be bringing up a moderator, Dr. Amina Dorai, Country Director, Pathfinder International, Nigeria. Round of applause, please. This is going to be a 40-minute session, and we will stick to time because people who stick to time are people who keep to their words. So I will be handing over the microphone to the moderator, Dr. Amina Dorai, as she takes us off on this role. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us. I'm really excited and honored to be sitting today with very experienced advocates, women's health specialists, even financial specialists actually, because everything has to do with women, because men and women, as we say, we're kind of 50-50 in this nation, and we have all heard the reasons why we need to, as a matter of urgency and as a matter of sustainable development, carry everyone along, and that is the inclusion we're talking about. This session is supposed to review a little bit about women's health and the Sustainable Development Goals. We want to explore the intersection priorities for 2030 and beyond. Women's health. Here in this room, we have more than 50% of participants that are women. And we know that if you've been to the hospital, you'll agree with me that almost all the time the patients that are there are either women or children, right? And to be honest, even the caregivers are mostly women. We have more women nurses, we have more women community healthcare workers, even though we have, we're having more women doctors recently, actually. A lot of young women are going into the medical profession, and it's really exciting because many men, especially in my part of the world, want their women to be treated by women. And the answer or the question is, would you allow your girl child to go to school and study either medicine or nursing or pharmacy or any health-related field if you really want your child or your wife to be attended to by a woman? So here with me today, we're going to have some interesting discussions from different perspectives. But before we do that, I want to just say a little bit about the Purple Book as well. For me, I don't think purple was just because we have pink and blue coming together to make purple at all. purple signifies a lot, and my friend and sister talked about it. I looked at purple, it signifies justice, and that's what we're talking about, gender justice. Purple signifies dignity, and that is what we're talking about, human dignity. Women's dignity is human dignity. It's talking about loyalty as well. And we're loyal, all of us here, by being here, we're loyal to the gender equity or gender equality cause, whatever you want to call it. So purple to me is not by chance. In modern society, purple represents the fight for gender equality and also International Women's Day. We're here to talk about the roles that have traditionally been assigned to the women and men, and also the relationships that these roles have on the health and well-being of women. I'll start by asking my friend and sister, Dr. Lillian Amonachi. She has been working in the field of women's health for over 2 decades. She has seen a lot. She has actually a huge experience in seeing how programs can address the major issues and barriers that affects women's health. And why are we talking about women's health? Mahmoud Fatalla, who was the past president of the International Federation of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, once said, and I quote, "Women are not dying of diseases we cannot treat. They are dying because societies have yet to make the decision that their lives are worth saving." Most of the causes of women's diseases or women's maternal mortality rather are preventable. Many of them are preventable, and we all know we've been working on this for decades, but are we really serious about addressing women's health and also reducing maternal mortality? That is the question that I want our panelists to answer today. So Dr. Lillian, in your experience, how does the intersection of access to education, socioeconomic factors, cultural beliefs and practices, affect the health of women and the impact that it has on maternal health outcomes? Because we know there's something that we call social determinants of health, right? Almost everything we know here is social determinants of health, from education, infrastructure, housing, social factors, cultural factors. So for Dr. Lillian, I would like her to really talk a bit about your experience on how these, factors have, impact on the health and well-being of women, and also the maternal health outcomes, maternal mortality, and the rest. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Mina, and good afternoon, everyone. I think my voice is loud enough. I don't think this is... Okay. So thank you for this opportunity to be here, and congratulations to the NSG and PIC group. Dr. Mina, to answer your question, yes, the social determinants of health actually have a huge effect on the maternal mortality indices that we have in the country today. Without boring one with actually what those indices are, let's start from saying the access to education that you talk about. A few years ago, I think a telco had this advert, and I was happy to hear them talk about the effect of media on gender issues and things like that. Mama na boy. I don't know if we can remember that advert, and everyone rejoiced and everything. So in Nigeria and most African countries, really, that is the sentiment, that the boy child is of more value than the girl child. And so when you come to an environment where 75% of the environments are living below poverty line, there are choices to be made. So already the girl child starts off as a disadvantage from the home, where she comes from, where there are choices to be made, where there are sacrifices to be made, where there's only money to send one person to school or something. She gets kept at home, and all the resources channeled into grooming and making the boy child more prosperous. So that is the first step of this disadvantage that we talk about, and the access to education. Now, there have been so many studies that show that women that have higher level of education and higher socioeconomic status are able to make better, have better maternal health outcomes, which is they're able to make a choice to seek health, to seek help when they want to. They're able to afford it. They are not waiting for someone to make that decision for them. So all this starts from the access to education. So that alone has a huge impact on women's maternal health and the outcomes, whether it's the maternal mortality, the infant mortality that we have, and all the other negative indices that we have in Nigeria as a country today. And if we leave even the access to education, when we look at the socio-economic factors, I'm going to speak plainly. For a lot of times and for a long time in this country, as a woman, you seek to access a loan or get money to do something. All kinds of questions are being asked. And you are asked to bring a letter from a male that is going to co-sign with you or going to guarantee you or something like that. So what this means is that women are at a disadvantage when it even comes to accessing economic activities that would help improve their own lot. And when it comes to nutrition, we all know how it is in homes. And when I say homes, I know a lot of us here are either middle class or above, but in places where there's real poverty, when you talk of nutrition, the woman sacrifices. She wants to give. It's even seen as respect. You keep the choicest of things for your husband. You keep, after your husband, you think of your children and you think of yourself last. And most times, even when you're hungry, you pretend that you're not hungry just so that others can go ahead and have something, have some nutrients in them. All these things work together to affect the woman's health. And then she goes through the burden of she's carrying a child, a pregnancy, she's working, she's having some other little mouths to feed, she's supporting her husband in whatever way that she can. In my organization, TA Connect, we support a program which is the group antenatal care model. We have over a million, supporting over a million women undergoing antenatal care and services and things like that, mostly in the Northeast and North Central. And you can tell, you can tell that most of these women don't have the exigencies to make decisions for themselves. They don't have the access to good nutrition and all the sanitary things that that a higher education level will give them or higher economic standard will give them. And then we'll also talk about the impact of our cultural beliefs and practices. Those ones also abound, Even where you say the woman is of working class, I'm sorry, I'm going back to socioeconomic now. Because the woman is taking so many childbearing breaks and sometimes they actually stop working, we have what we call the iron curtain. They take time off from work to raise their children. By the time they come back, so we say if 10 women and 10 men start off on a career path and the woman takes some years off, by the time she comes back, the men have gone so far ahead and she has to come back either to an entry level or mid-level position. All those things lead to her socio-economic disadvantage. Of course, child marriage and female genital mutilation. Yeah, we can go on and on. Yeah.
Over and over again. And thank you. You lose weight, right? Maybe some may want the money more than the Thank you. Thank you so much. These are really important points, and I think we're going to continue to, go through those discussions as time goes. But I'll also, hand over to my sister, Mrs. Davila Akwele here. You have been
So, Mrs. Nabila Agwele, you have been in the, should I say, corridors of power for quite a long time, as the SA to the Honorable Minister of Finance. So what are your thoughts about the current state of women in leadership in Nigeria, particularly? Now that we're racing towards 2030, how can we address this long-standing challenge? We have been talking about, having more women, one woman in decision-making processes, because when we have women, in those positions, they will be able to make decisions even for their own gender as well. So what do you think, about the, current state of Nigeria in terms of women's leadership, and how can we address these issues? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Let me start by congratulating the NESG and the PIC, Dr. Osasui, for first convening us last year for the first conference of its kind, putting the book together and continuing the conversation in an integrated and multi-sectoral manner. On the issue of women in leadership, I think we all know where we stand in Nigeria. We have a long way to go in terms of women's representation in the leadership corridors, and in recent years have even taken some steps back in terms of women's representation in the political space, for example. There are, though, a lot of opportunities here, and I'd like to highlight those. We've talked a lot already about social norms, prevailing biases and views with respect to both the worth, the role of women, the types of fields that they can enter into, and the ways in which their representation is actually linked to progress, whether it's in the political space, in the health sector, etc. And we really need to focus in, hone in on understanding those key behavioral biases, because those are what is underlying a lot of decision making, whether it's with respect to bills being passed or not being passed, whether it's with respect to decisions made, especially in the healthcare sector. So the work that organizations such as the PIC are doing in terms of bringing to bear an understanding of these social norms, the underlying behavioral psychology, and then applying that toward integrated human-centric solutions that bring together stakeholders is really, really critical. That being said, the great thing is that there's a lot of data, both domestic, regionally, and globally, that speaks to the importance of increased representation of women and diverse voices. So I loved your comment around not just looking at how do we support women, but how are we looking at supporting women at the intersection of, for example, gender and disabilities, for example. And this sort of also ties into issues of representation. So we need to continue to push for more representation of women. We know that having diverse voices at the decision-making table, whether it's political, business, etc., leads to more integrated solutions that take into account the needs of those communities, those people, whether it's women, persons of disabilities, people from rural communities that need to be taken into account. Some other things to consider is that we already have, we're building a repository of policies, frameworks. I think one of the previous speakers said that we don't lack for policies. And even in this space, we have a national gender policy that speaks to representation of women. We have a focus around affirmative action that really needs to be implemented. So it's really around having that political leadership and buy-in. And also, I want to speak about advocacy. I think all of us here are advocates. We've bought into that it is important as a fundamental human right to have representation, have access for women and for broader communities. And also we have a clear understanding that there are links between this and our economic prosperity as a country. We also need to know that for a lot of decision makers, this level of awareness is really not there. This notion of connecting the dots and then doing it in a way that allows for people to feel that they're buying into a decision, buying into an idea where they also will benefit, their constituencies will benefit, and that they will also reap the return on investment in having more women, more diversity of interests at the table. And this is where we as advocates really need to be conscious of the ways in which we engage decision makers who are maybe not yet allies, but whom we need to be allies. We need them to buy in. We can leverage members of their community. We can leverage data and information that is meaningful to them. So for example, in the agriculture space, examples around agric. In the political space, making the case for representation as it ties into strong policy decision making and ultimately GDP is really critical. So I think those are some of my reflections.
Thank you very much. And I think why we're here, thank you. And I think, why Mrs. Nabila is very important in this piece is because, I attended an event and it was an international event and ministers were all there. And someone just said, every minister here is actually a minister of health because everything you do is related to health. So if you take it that way, they say health is wealth, right? So I think health and finance just go very hand in hand. Thank you very much for that. So Dr. Ejike Oji, you've actually been in this space for over nearly 4 decades. That is a long time to be doing work for women, and he usually calls himself a passionate advocate for women. And we all, we've seen your work, Dr. Ejike Oji. So in your view, what are the biggest threats to sustainability of programs and projects like the midwifery service scheme, which you supported to bring to bear in Nigeria? What are some possible models or best practices that can be employed to ensure that these very beautiful programs are sustainable beyond, a certain, for instance, life cycle of the project? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amina. Good morning, colleagues. I'm delighted to be here, to be part of this wonderful occasion. To take us back a little bit about the midwifery service scheme, just to give a proper context so that people can understand when I make some allusions. The midwifery service scheme came out of frustration. Amina and I were in IPAS at the time, and then one of the key things that came always on board, why are women dying needlessly? We focused on post-abortion care to reduce deaths and disabilities from abortion. But one day I thought about it. I said, why don't I look philosophically and see what could be done that might drive the needed changes? And it became, I just told the M&E expert in the office, can you please disaggregate what is the percentage of women that are having skilled attendants? And when the information came back, only 35% of our women have skilled attendants when they are going to have a baby. And anybody that is a physician or a nurse would know that all the deaths and disabilities come from just 6 to 7% of deliveries. But the important thing is that you don't know which one will be complicated. So all the maternal deaths, 5 causes: postpartum hemorrhage, abortion, obstructed labor, eclampsia and infection. And then so when a woman is having a baby and there's nobody to take care of all of these, the woman is as good as dead. And then when we realize that, so what is the best thing? The best thing is to change, make like the Pareto's rule, say switch the 20-80 and switch. So that's why what informed the midwifery service scheme. But before then, we had to do a lot of trainings. First, we shifted post-abortion care from doctors to midwives because they are much more generally across the country. We also supported the midwives to be able to give magnesium sulfate for eclampsia. And then, of course, introduction of misoprostol for postpartum hemorrhage. That all led to our now pushing, and that's why any day I celebrate our sister Amina Mohammed, because she was the one that I went to. And I said, Amina, you're doing so much on the MDG-related goals, and then you're intervening in maternal mortality areas. I see your mouth water when you talk about it, but these are the stark statistics. We're losing 800 women per 100,000 live births. So that's how we agreed to fund it. And it's just 4 pillars or 5. 1, take midwives to the rural areas. Pay them 75,000 naira a month, 50,000 salary, 25 bush allowance. Mobilize women, tell them that the services are free and available in the rural areas. And then at the same time, make sure there is a strong framework and plan for monitoring continuously and selectively evaluate our strategies. But most importantly, money. So that laid the foundation. Now, moving forward, like the question is, why was it not sustainable? The sustainability issue also goes to the political leadership. There was a somersault. First it was MDG, then the resources to support it ran out when the MDG ended, then brought Shopee. Shopee was the greatest fraud I've ever seen in my life. So, and that meant the money to support that very wonderful thing went through the roof. In fact, the UN said at that time that the midwifery service scheme was the best strategy to bring down maternal mortality in sub-Saharan Africa. Nigeria won 2 international awards. Yes, we did not sustain it. So we say we have good policies, the problem is sustainability. The other thing I would like to really talk about is lack of sustainable funding mechanism. Because when we introduced the midwifery service scheme, we said we must at the same time look for sustainability of funding. And that was why some of us pursued the National Health Act to conclusion. The basic provision, the basic healthcare provision was supposed to fund services at the primary care level, and that included maternal health and infants under the age of 5 and then older people. That also was supposed to have continued. Then finally, in terms of monitoring and evaluation, when you are going to do any project, first you have to think of leadership, then the governance structures and the service delivery outcomes that you're going to use. But most importantly, human capacity building. All those things we have not looked at. And finally, there was no mechanism at all, no framework at all, no plan to monitor what we're doing. So the KPIs, it might be in the books, but nobody's delivering them. So I would like to stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Oji. One of the most important things Dr. Oji talked about is also political will. And I remember during that time for the midwifery service scheme, it wasn't only about the federal level. States and local governments also had a role to play. They had counterpart funding that they needed to also provide. So I think for all of us, it's not only about having, very beautiful policies or programs at the national level, but it's also to make sure that everyone is carried along, as we say in Nigeria, nothing for us without us. Dr. Lillian, so this comes, to your next point as well. While Dr. Oji was talking about primary healthcare, for instance, we know that primary healthcare, is the bedrock of the health system. And in Nigeria, many of us have been saying, oh, how do we strengthen primary healthcare? How do we strengthen primary healthcare? So what do you think, based on your experience, what are the urgent priorities required to strengthen primary healthcare? And this is the final round, so I'll just make it quite short. But there's a lot to talk about, really. But we don't want to take all the time for this particular panel. So what do you think are the urgent priorities required to strengthen primary healthcare systems? Now that we're even starting a new administration, what should they focus on? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think primary healthcare is really the bedrock of any sustainable health program. And I happen to be part of the Minister of State for Health then team when we're rolling out the MSS program, the midwife service scheme, and just as you said, a lot of states, it was something that Dr. Pate was very passionate about, but a lot of the state governments did not keep to their part of the counterpart funding. Now that the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund has become a reality, so to speak, at least in the last couple of years, now there is some sort of direct funding to the PHCs, which a lot of, which hadn't happened before, right? Even most partners now, or most funders, like the US government now, are also channeling funds to the primary healthcare centers, when before they were focused on the tertiary and secondary levels of care. The dangers of that, however, is that people who haven't managed those kind of funds before, if they're not properly prepared to manage them, then we might be putting water in a basket. So part of the health system strengthening aspect, down to the primary healthcare centers, the officers in charge, is very important. We have to make sure that they are able to run, they're able to, we did a survey and we found that most of these officers in charge at the health primary center, at the primary levels of care, really don't have training on most basic things like financial management, how to run a budget, how to take an inventory, how to ensure that they don't have stockouts and things like that. So those are the things, those are the basic skills, managerial skills that they need to have so that they can better manage whatever little resources are getting down there and in a sustainable manner, right? So we also need to be sure that we are enhancing the quality of our maternal health care services. And that was why I talked about the group antenatal care as a model earlier, because everyone is saying, put the person in the center of their care. It's a client-centered model of care, where the pregnant woman is able to understand through training, through with her colleagues, why she's there, what she needs to do, both within the hospital, outside the hospital, and make decisions like coming to deliver in hospital with skilled birth attendants, just as Dr. G had talked about, and what needs to be done for her during delivery, after delivery, and just around the immediate postpartum period. Of course, we can't get any of these things without implementing effective referral systems. Primary health care, no matter how much we flog it and push it, it is still primary health care. A lot of them are the human resource complement there are the community health extension workers. Some of them don't even have midwives and nurses. So while we load and we train them, they can do as much as they can do. They need to know when to make timely referral and how to follow these referrals through. And of course, we need to continue to address the sociocultural barriers within these communities that we wait. A woman who is bleeding will need to be waiting for her husband to come back before she rushes to the hospital. A woman doesn't have money to take certain decisions and things like that. We need to address those things, or is waiting for her mother-in-law to come and take us. So we need to involve both the community leaders, religious leaders, and even the government stakeholders in making sure that all these things are done.
That's very comprehensive. And for me, representing Pathfinder, I can say that GANC, the group antenatal care, really works because women actually feel part of their care and they talk to each other because, they have a cohort where they can, reach out even after, they're in the hospital. So just quickly, thank you very much, Dr. Anom Nachi, for that. Thank you. Yeah, please. I'll just like to ask Mrs. Abuele, what should the Nigerian government's priorities be in the short, medium, and long term to prioritize the investment that we're talking about on the health of women? Because, there needs to be a lot of cross-sector collaboration to prioritize women. We can see that women's health, has a lot to do with so many other, priorities or, sectors. So how can the government, prioritize women's health in the short, medium, and long term? And apologies, but I want to rush a few of us for the last few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So in terms of priorities, we've talked about funding and financing. And I think this extends beyond health to the broader perception around financing for human capital in Nigeria. We really need to continue to push for that paradigm shift with decision makers in terms of budget allocations, continuing to make the case for investments in health, but also continuing to demonstrate why there's strong return on investments for other sectors as well. And sitting from sort of the finance perspective, I think one of the things that we've benefited from is the current minister who I work for is a woman, but also more importantly, approaches her work from an inclusion and a gender lens. And so some of the things that we've put in place, one is a gender responsive budget requirement. So under the last two budgets, there's been a clear requirement that NDAs include gender disaggregate data and prioritize gender responsive and inclusive approaches. What I would say to take that forward is to really, for the health sector and for other sectors such as education, for example, water, sanitation, etc., that tie into areas that have an impact on health and health-seeking behavior and access to health. We take that a step forward and ensure that there's accountability around, first of all, the KPIs that are being used, that they're disaggregate KPIs, appropriate KPIs, and that there's also that data that's being tracked and brought in. There's also need to focus on maternal and reproductive health care, really sort of tying in access at the rural level, leveraging innovative technology, leveraging existing CSO and private sector and startup structures on ground. I think one person said that we have everything that we need, but we're not really approaching things the right way.
Thank you.
So institutional arrangements and partnership approaches are critical. Investing in the health workforce in terms of capacity building, ensuring that we have more women in leadership in the health space. So one thing that's interesting is that even though the majority of health workers are women and a lot of the health issues impact women and girls disproportionately, those sitting at the positions of power with respect to decision making in that space are by and large men.
Exactly.
So we need to build the capacity in those men to include that gender lens.
Thank you.
And also continue to encourage a development of a pipeline of more women in those decision-making positions.
Thank you very much. That is really a very good point. And I'll just say that about 2 weeks ago, I think we launched Women in Global Health in Nigeria. And all of us actually are supposed to be part of Women in Global Health. You don't have to be a woman. And that is all about it. It's about building up another generation of women that would even surpass what we're all doing here on the table. So everyone is encouraged to actually join that because we need more women at the decision-making table. Thank you so much. Dr. Audrey, my last question to you is, you've been supporting and leading CSOs and women rights organizations for a very long time. What do you think CSOs and women's rights organizations can do, or how can they be better positioned to advocate for and advance the health of women in Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question again. For success in that area of work, first of all, I would like to say most CSOs should also look at, do a proper situational analysis of the needs. Most CSOs are crowded in one area. But if you look at the issues that concern women in the country, just working in government for just about a year and a half, what I just saw meant that we needed to expand, especially in terms of CSO work. One, you can see just a few people are talking about cancer. And then cancer is going to kill 1 million Africans between now and 2030. How many CSOs are doing work in cancer in Nigeria? Second one, we talk about gender-based violence. A lot of people are talking about it. But to do proper situational analysis and say how many people are doing and what they're really doing, we're not still doing enough. Let me give you an example. As a forensic medical expert, I've trained in about 19 states. Doctors, nurses, midwives, police officers, DSS officers on issues of assault, sexual assault, rape. You will be so shocked the level of, should I say, raping young victims. What is it called? Pedophilia. People don't know that is an epidemic in Nigeria. So in terms of what they have to do, they have to expand their scope, but they also have to look at issues of capacity. Most CSOs do not have the capacity. They should look at how will they capacitate themselves to be able to even do grants. And there is this thing that most NGOs are not non-governmental individuals. So they have to have protocols in their offices, organizational protocols, financial system management, how even to hire, so that it will be transparent. And then finally, there should be hand-holding. International non-governmental organizations hand-hold, not to say you don't have capacity, hand-hold them to build capacity. The established CSOs should also provide that. At the Association of Advancement for Family Planning in Nigeria, we do that. We train NGOs in the rural areas. And then finally, the NGOs should focus on women to build capacity for women. I've always believed if you give men knowledge, information, skills, and ability, they can act for themselves. Yeah. In my organization, I have Dr. Ejikoji Community Development Foundation. We're developing a 5 million women database as we speak. And we're using digital technology. Now they can even, on their platform, they have access to artificial intelligence. By clicking on their icon, it takes them to their WhatsApp. So they can ask any question. Young women who are in business can even just say, do a proposal for me. It does a proposal. They will now humanize it as they like. So these are some of the things that we need to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please give out. I think our panelists have really done justice, but because of time constraints, we have to stop here. I'm afraid we don't have much time for questions, so we will have to stop here. But there's a lot that we learned, and I'm sure we're going to carry them forward. Governance, political will, and accountability is really critical. The financial sector is very important in the health and well-being of women. Our health system, the primary health care, it's the bedrock. While we improve quality, we also need to improve the capacity of those that are working in the primary healthcare field. I like also the point about, building another generation of women that would lead not only the health sector, but all the sectors in the society. CSOs are very critical. We heard from Dr. Oji that their capacity needs to be
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for staying. We'll be done shortly. I would like to quickly call on Ms. Ronke Kosoko. As we reflect on the 2023 Gender Inclusion Summit, it's important to share one testimonial of transformation from the 2022 summit. So please, Ronke, can you just come for a couple of minutes? She asked the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning a question about gender representation in the maritime sector. And that problem has been solved. She's here to testify herself.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ronke Kosoko. Always an annual participant at NES. So last year, NES 28, I saw there was a gender inclusion session. It was very important to me because of my experience in the maritime industry. So that day I ensured that and the Minister for Finance listened. And that day I said, she shouldn't domicile it with the agencies because I know how it was going to end. Surprisingly, right there on the podium, she asked the UN women and I think Minister for, the country representative to attend to what I said, because we have a 2% women representation in the industry and 98% male domination. So the Monday after that, UN was ready. We had our meeting. In fact, a UN women representative just walking shortly before Dr. Dirisi decided this. So they were very fast, pragmatic. We went through the first session. Dr. Mika, what was that? We did a lot of paperwork. To our surprise, we got a 5-year global approval from the United Nations. UN Women was asked to work with us, with the Ministry for Transportation, with the IMO, International Maritime Organization, and to scale down gender inclusion across the entire maritime sector. Interestingly, barely 6 months after that, I was now opportune to now share another position that really puts me in charge of almost every aspect of the industry, making that work easier for UN Women. Because the country representative came to Lagos, spoke with all the organizations and groups and all that. All in all, what PIC has started and the NASG has been taking up our industry, and I think that should happen more, be replicated across other sectors, so we can really scale down and really execute, across sector. I'm happy you did this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so as we race towards the 2023 summit, I don't want to bore you with another presentation. So permit me to tell 2 quick stories. About 2 decades ago, I went to do my youth service in a rural hospital in Ebonyi State, a Catholic hospital. And getting to the hospital, one of the things I found out was that women come late, like you would expect in a rural setting because of all the problems we've talked about, transportation and the rest. And a lot of them would come right when it's just about time to have their baby, because they want to have the baby at the gate of the hospital. And I kept wondering why, and I was told that the reason is because it's a Catholic missionary hospital. When you get to the gate, they will help you. But if you don't cross the gate, you don't have to pay anything, because the Catholic sisters will help you free. And then the other observation was that men used to bring their wives in wheelbarrows. And I used to be very worried about that until Sister Tumi, an Irish gynecologist who had been in Nigeria since 1955, she's late now, said to me, "Oh, Osasu, you don't have much to be worried about. When I came to Nigeria in 1955, the men were bringing their wives in fishing nets. So this is an improvement." So 2 decades later, I had the opportunity to lead part of the verbal and social autopsy study looking at infant and under 5 mortality in Nigeria in 2 states, in Plateau and Niger. And I want to take you through a quick journey of that experience. So we got to Niger State. This is Plateau. So we got to Plateau State. One of the communities we're going to visit was across this river. So it was almost like a small island surrounded by a river. And it takes about, from the community all the way to the closest local government, is about a 90 minutes walk. Now, there is no health center. Next slide. No health center in the community, no school. When a woman is in labor and they think she needs assistance, they had to construct this manual stretcher, fabricated stretcher. So they put her on this stretcher and do the 90 minutes walk. Also walking across that river you saw in the previous picture. We had to walk through on foot. We went in November 2019, so it was easier for us to do that. But they told us that when they do this during the rainy season, sometimes the water gets to their shoulders. And in Niger State, one of the communities we visited in Niger State, so that's me, we were told when we're going there, we had to do like a 1-hour bike ride from the closest local government. And we're told that if we did not charter the bikes for the day, we'll be coming back on the camels, because there is no other way out of there. So we had to charter the bikes for the day. And we were also in this community. Next slide, see the health center. So that's the health center. So no health center, also no school. And, because this was a data-driven study, we were going to places in Nigeria that had the highest incidence of under 5 and maternal mortality. And I asked myself this question today. This is 2 decades after my experience in Ebonyi in 2000. So what is changing? How rapidly are we actually making progress? Because that's why I'm actually contrasting a 20-year span. And this brings us to reflect on why we want to do the summit this year. It's about reflecting on how to see inclusion as a human rights issue. Because we were told, for example, in this community that once you are in labor, you have a sick child, and the child doesn't just get better normally, then you just consider it a death sentence. So it gives us an opportunity, next slide, to begin to reflect on three key things. Access, opportunities, and human rights are inclusion issues. They're not issues, they're not privileges, they're not opportunities that we're giving to people. It is the right of every Nigerian to be included in healthcare, education, access to employment. These are not things that we should consider as, oh, I'm doing you a favor. And then we want this year to think about a paradigm shift in our worldview. Can we apply an intersectional gender lens into the way we view our work? Understanding the fact that people may not live to see the next day if we do not take this action. Can we begin to measure progress, not as a tick box, but as a social justice issue and as an inclusion responsibility? So in 2023, our summit will advance strategies to achieve equity, inclusion, and social justice across sectors. Briefly, this is just an array. We're going to have give out a small brochure that talks about. We're going to have pre-summit events, monthly seminars from June. We're going to have a gender and inclusion art and poetry competition in line with this year's theme. We've broken it down this year. It's a 2-day summit. So last year was 1 day. We don't think 1 day is enough to talk about gender. So this year we're talking about gender for 2 days, November 7 and November 8, 2023. We'll have an academic focused track and then practitioner focused tracks. And we'd also have post-summit, we're coming back with the Purple Book. I'll stop now and I would invite the CEO of NESG, Mr. Laoye Jayola, to walk us through the unveiling of the 2023 theme.
Sorry, can I be joined by Dr. Isa and Dr. Modi, please? Okay. And the country director of Palladium, Isa, please join us. Modi, please. You know, I like this gender matter. So I'm going to give. Okay, I know. Ojo, they say I shouldn't leave you so that because they just gave me an assignment, so I shouldn't lose money. Gain country director, please come. Please. Please, I'm going to give you the mic and you'll coordinate the way we unveil so that I'm very, very tense.
Thank you. Yes. So first of all, I'd like to congratulate the NESG. I'm going to take that opportunity and congratulate the NESG. And of course, pick on this amazing launch, if you like, of the Purple Book and the unveiling of this year's theme. So I have the special honor of coordinating this. So in doing that, I'm going to say, we say congratulations. We give a round of applause, first of all. Yeah, and huge congratulations as we unveil it. Okay. Yes, I think we need loads of hands here. And this year's theme is No Outsiders, Building Bridges for Gender and Inclusion in Africa. Huge congratulations and a round of applause. Thank you.
So we'll just move directly to the book launch. Yes, let's just move to this way. Kindly just move over. Please, everyone, join us. Sorry, media, can you just move up a bit, please? People standing. Where is it? Just sit. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Dr. Sui, give this to someone. Please, put it on front here.
Okay. I thought they would get one of our women to do it. Okay, just give me the sign to. Let me know. Let me know. Okay. Want me to say something? Okay. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and it's an honor. It's a pleasure to be asked to launch the Purple Book. And so, on behalf of NESG, on behalf of the PIC, and on behalf of everyone else here, part of this process and bringing the Purple Book to fruition, I declare the Purple Book launched.
Thank you. Yes, for picture. Yes. Please hold for pictures. Please, can we all move to the center of the room for pictures, proper pictures, please? Just take a book and then move to the center of the room, please. Yes. Take a book. Please, thank you. Please. Please, Madam Tessie Kuhe, gender specialist from USAID, please, can you kindly join the pictures? Gender specialist USAID, please kindly join the picture. Oga, hold on, please. Hold on. Please, can you excuse so that she can walk in the picture? Please, representing the Norwegian ambassador, hold on. Please, let her come. Please, Shola, please, can you also join the picture, please? Thank you.
So we have to do a 6-person photograph because of newspaper. So CEO, Dr. Sasui, looks like this man is a board member, I don't know.
Once we get the picture, then I will would break us up into two, just for newspaper purposes. Please, you're blocking her. You are blocking her in the picture, please. Thank you. Please make sure you get everyone. Okay, just kindly indulge me. I'd like to have the chairman, Dr. Sui, the country director for GAIN, Dr. Moody, to also join, and the Royal Norwegian Ambassador. Please don't sit. We'll have the second picture. We're just breaking you up into two. Please. Please, sorry, 1 more minute. We just want to have, please, Nabila, please also join this picture. Just, okay. If you would like to sit and come back, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Please, can we have Dr. Nomnachid Oiza, please, Dr. Oji, Dr. Amina. Mrs. Ekaite, please also join the picture. Mrs. Former. Yes, no, you can join, please. We have to make sure that it works, so it's inclusion. Fantastic. Did we get it? Is it done? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. A round of applause, please. Okay, what? Are you okay? All right, thank you so much. A round of applause for everyone, please. Please clap, clap, clap.
Please do me a favor, madam.
Let me take it.
God bless you. It's your book.
All right, we're almost at the end of the event. Would like to take feedback. Please, can you turn down the music? Would like to take feedback. For 2 minutes, we would bring up Dr. Akin to come and take 1 or 2 feedbacks from the audience. Dr. Akin, please. A round of applause for him, please.
Thank you. I stand on all existing protocols. Because we're an inclusive organization, we also want to take feedback, be it on the presentation that was made or presentations that were made, or general feedback for us as we plan and build the momentum towards Gender Summit 2023. So I would recognize just 3 people. You have 1 minute each to provide a feedback, and I'm going to be on the time. Thank you so much. You are number 1. Number 2, a man. Balance. Okay, let's start with you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Shola Folayo, and I coordinate what we call the Multidimensional Poverty Index. And interestingly, we work very closely with the NESG, especially the PIC, for the work that we do. And in terms of multidimensional poverty, we looked at beyond monetary and income data to access, to do analysis around poverty. But why do I mention this? Is interestingly, for 2022, we also had a side event on poverty. And the NESG is also helping to look at the behavioral insight of why people actually do choose to be poor, instead of taking up the opportunities that will help them to exit poverty. The government, especially the current government, like the outgoing government, did spend a lot, and also with support from development partners in addressing poverty. But some people, because of, like, for instance, the cash transfer that is being done, people still prefer to, to benefit from all of these things. So the work that we are doing next with NESG borders around looking at the behavioral nudges and insight why people are perpetually in poverty or perpetuate the cycle of poverty. So I really congratulate the NESG PIC for the work they are doing, and I look forward to further collaboration with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shola. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. It's still morning, right? Or afternoon. My name is Tolulope Babajide, and I am the Gender Network Manager at Financial Sector Deepening Africa, and it is a DFI that is funded by the UK government. And thank you very much, and it is amazing to see the good work that has gone into this purple book, and it is good. But one question, or maybe a comment that I want to take, that I've taken from all of these is, Now that we have this book, now that a lot of insights have gone into these books, what is the plan to involve the private sector? We've seen, hospitals, healthcare centers that are no longer in operation. We've seen the need for financing, and we all know that the government cannot do it alone. So where is the point? At what point do we involve the private sector? It is very important. And how do we go about this? How do we operationalize this? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to invite Dr. Sasui, but while she makes her way forward, she will respond to... Okay, so first, to respond to your question, thank you, Dr. Shola, for that amazing contribution. We're doing a very beautiful work trying to find out using behavioral insights to find what the drivers of poverty are in Nigeria, and we are collaborating with with them to do that with regards to the MPI index. To respond to your question, the NESG already that is a think tank and works strongly with the private sector. So we are the go-to when it comes to connecting the private sector to government and all the state actors. And so what we have done is to, as a build-up on the Nigeria Economic Summit, is to convene this conference or this summit such that the topical conversations that you would ordinarily want to have that are tilted towards gender, they don't get to have adequate time for discussions, and then we can have it in this event. So one of the things we are doing is we are leveraging also the NESG community to participate actively in this summit. Thankfully, we have collaborations even with, for instance, we have a collaboration with the Lagos Business School right now, doing things around that, even financial inclusion and all of that. So we're working collaboratively with the private sector, also in mobilizing and making them active participants. You saw from the last conference, the CEO of Sterling Bank make presentations and all of that. So yes, some of the conversations are in the pipeline, but as a community and as a connector, the NESG platform, we are leveraging that community to pivot into large collaborations and partnership with the private sector. I'll keep it at that. Dr. Sasui, are we ready? Okay, I will invite Dr. Sasui to give the vote of thanks.
So look, let me answer part of the question you asked. More often than not, I've asked people to talk about, private sector. When we did the development plan, again, we supported the government in doing the National Development Plan and 2050 Agenda. And you look at the development plan, they will tell you government will only give 10%, 90% will come from what? Private sector. But I tell you, that private sector, it's not that they cannot do it. If the environment is not enabled, if you don't allow them to prosper and they grow, they can't do anything. I tell you, the health fund in particular, all the counterpart funds require to leverage and open the health area. Private sector has been ready. Development donor has been ready. And I'm like, you agree with me that states don't make themselves available. We've put together the state government to let them know the importance of the 1% that will open all of those areas. Not done. You know private sector already that are adopting health centers. It's a general thing we sell among our people. Adopt. And to date, I know we have close to almost about 500-600 adopted by private sector. But you see, these things need to be collaborative. So what I tell people is that it requires all of us here. It's not a job for one group or the other. All of us need to hone into our people. The governor forum there means the new governors are being brought in. We need to begin to demand accountability. You saw what Osasi said. 20 years down the line, you can't believe that exists in Nigeria. But they're in a community we're all part of, and we need to begin to ask questions. I don't think our politicians are as bad as you think they are. But everybody will go away with murder if you enable them. We don't ask questions. We don't get involved. Sorry to you, this is not yours. Other side, I've been fighting people on ASU, NUC. They're doing a lot of work. And actually, me, it's fight. And I asked a simple question. So all the money you're demanding from government, where do you think it's going to come from? But those of us parents sit in this house, and we know the public universities, none of them get as much as $100 per student in a year. That comes to the government coffers. And when they fight, parents sit back and fold their hands. It is them and them. It is us. So it's a collective action. We can only drive collective action. Ask everybody, join it. Let's talk at it together. Because if Nigeria is not right, you can jackpot, you can run away, but you'll come back. I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the board and management of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, I would like to extend our gratitude and appreciation to every single one that shared this precious moment with us. Thank you so much for coming. I want to thank all our special guests. I want to thank our representative from the Ministry of Agriculture. I want to thank our esteemed panelists. I want to thank our esteemed book reviewers. I want to thank our esteemed unveilers, Dr. Moody, Oiza. I just really want to thank everyone and looking forward to co-creating the 2023 Gender and Inclusion Summit with everyone. Let us go and make it happen. Thank you.
So there's lunch. Please let's all make our way to the restaurant for lunch, please. Thank you so much.